They told me I was insane to walk into that courtroom alone on New Year's Eve. They said Holden Carmichael would destroy me before the clock struck midnight, that his attorney would have me sobbing into my sleeve by the time the champagne stopped flowing in Times Square. In the cutthroat world of high-stakes divorce litigation, you don't represent yourself against a man who owns half the pharmaceutical patents in the Northeast. You especially don't do it when he's hired the most vicious lawyer in Manhattan to gut you like a fish. But here's what nobody understood. When you spend 8 years helping someone build an empire, you learn exactly where the skeletons are buried. And I knew every single grave. What happened over the next 2 days didn't just wipe the smirk off Holden's face. It shattered his empire, exposed a conspiracy that reached into hospital boardrooms, and ended with federal agents storming a New Year's Eve gala in front of 300 guests. This is the story of how I went from doormat to demolition expert, and how the wife everyone pitied became the woman everyone feared. The laughter started the second I stood up. It was a rich, arrogant sound that bounced off the wood-paneled walls of the Manhattan Supreme Court. Holden Carmichael leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and smoothed down his charcoal Tom Ford suit. He turned to his attorney, a shark named Gideon Cross, and whispered just loud enough for the entire front row to hear. "Look at her, Gideon. She's wearing the dress I bought her for that charity auction 3 years ago. Pathetic. She actually thinks she can win this?" Gideon Cross didn't laugh. He was a man with silver temples and eyes like frozen steel, known in legal circles as the Reaper because he left nothing standing. He just smirked and tapped his Mont Blanc pen against the polished oak table. "Let her play lawyer, Holden," Gideon said quietly. "Judge Whitmore hates amateurs. She'll be held in contempt before lunch and will be celebrating at per se by 2. Across the aisle, I sat at the plaintiff's table. It was empty except for a yellow legal pad, a ballpoint pen, and a paper cup of water that had gone lukewarm an hour ago. Unlike the defense table, which was crowded with 3 paralegals, 2 laptops, and bankers' boxes stacked with evidence, my side looked like a yard sale. I kept my head down, my blonde hair pulled into a tight, no-nonsense ponytail. To anyone watching, I looked defeated. I looked like a woman who'd been discarded for a newer model, specifically Holden's 26-year-old research assistant, Bianca something or other with the fake lips and the real ambition. "All rise," the bailiff barked. The door behind the bench swung open, and the Honorable Miriam Whitmore entered the courtroom. Whitmore was a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years on the bench and 0 tolerance for incompetence. She adjusted her glasses, glanced down at the docket, and frowned. "Case number 8147, Carmichael versus Hale. Final hearing on asset division and spousal support. Appearances." Gideon Cross stood smoothly, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Gideon Cross representing the respondent, Mr. Holden Carmichael, Your Honor." The judge looked at my table. "And for the petitioner?" I stood up. My chair scraped gently against the tile floor. Holden snickered behind his hand.
"Emery Hale, Your Honor," I said. My voice came out softer than I wanted, with just the slightest tremor. "Representing myself." Judge Whitmore removed her glasses and sighed, the kind of long, weary exhale that signaled she already regretted taking this case. "Ms. Hale," she began, "I'm going to ask you this once, and I want you to listen very carefully. Your husband is the CEO of Carmichael Biotech. The marital assets in question are estimated at $73 million. Mr. Cross here has been practicing law for 28 years. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed pro se? Because I'm telling you right now, you're bringing a butter knife to a gunfight." "I can't afford an attorney, Your Honor," I said, looking down at my hands like a scared rabbit. "Holden froze all the joint accounts 4 months ago. I've been living off tips from my old waitressing job just to pay rent." Gideon shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Carmichael merely secured the assets to prevent reckless spending. We offered Ms. Hale a very generous settlement of $75,000. She refused it out of spite." $75,000? Judge Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "For an estate of this size?" "It's more than she brought into the marriage, Your Honor," Gideon said smoothly, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ms. Hale was a waitress at a diner in Queens when they met. She has no financial literacy, no business experience. We're trying to protect the company and its shareholders." "I see." The judge looked at me with something close to pity. "Ms. Hale, I strongly advise you to reconsider that settlement. If you proceed, you'll be held to the same standard as any practicing attorney. I won't coddle you. If you fail to object properly, evidence gets in. If you fail to file motions correctly, you lose. Do you understand?" I looked up. For just a split second, the fear in my eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp, but it was gone so fast that Holden missed it entirely. "I understand, Your Honor. I'm ready." Holden leaned over to Gideon. "This is going to be entertaining. She'll be crying in 10 minutes. "Mr. Cross," Judge Whitmore said, "your opening statement." Gideon Cross walked to the center of the courtroom. He didn't use notes. He was a performer, and this was his stage. "Your Honor," Gideon began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "This case is tragic, but it's also simple. Holden Carmichael is a visionary. He built Carmichael Biotech from a single-room lab in Newark into a pharmaceutical powerhouse worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He worked 20-hour days. He missed holidays. He sacrificed his health, his youth, everything for the success of his company and, by extension, his family." He turned and gestured at me like I was evidence at a crime scene. And what did his wife do? She stayed home. She attended charity luncheons. She spent his money on yoga classes and book clubs. Now that the marriage has broken down due to irreconcilable differences, she wants half. She wants to dismantle a company that employs over 4,000 people just to fund a lifestyle she contributed nothing to earn. He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. "We will prove that Ms. Hale's contributions to this marriage were negligible. We will prove that a prenuptial agreement exists, one she conveniently claims to have lost. We ask this court to limit spousal support to the statutory minimum and grant Mr. Carmichael full retention of all company shares and assets. Thank you."
He sat down. It was a solid opening. It painted Holden as the hard-working genius and me as the gold-digging leech. "Miss Hale," Judge Whitmore said, "your opening statement. Keep it brief." I stood up. I didn't go to the podium, I just stood awkwardly in the middle of the aisle, clutching my yellow notepad against my chest like it was body armor. "Your Honor," I began, my voice shaking slightly, "my husband says I did nothing. He says I was just a waitress who got lucky. That's true. I was a waitress at Rosie's Diner on Steinway Street when we met 8 years ago." Holden rolled his eyes. "Here comes the sob story," he thought. I took a breath, steadying myself. "But the law in this state recognizes marriage as a partnership. It recognizes good faith. What Mr. Cross isn't telling you is that Holden didn't build Carmichael Biotech alone. He built it with $62 million in stolen research funding." The room went dead silent. You could hear someone's phone buzz 3 rows back. Gideon's head snapped up. Holden's smirk evaporated like steam off hot asphalt. "He also built it with the help of the Crescent Trust," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands under the name Meridian Holdings and with 4 luxury condos in Miami purchased under his driver's name, a man named Elias Webb." Holden slammed his hand on the table. "That's a lie. She's lying." "Mr. Carmichael, sit down," Judge Whitmore barked. Her expression had shifted from pity to sharp interest. Miss Hale, those are serious allegations. Alleging hidden assets without proof is defamation. You could be paying his legal fees by the end of the day." "I know, Your Honor," I said calmly. I walked back to my table and picked up a single piece of paper. I handed it to the bailiff. "Marked as Exhibit A." Gideon snatched the copy from the bailiff's hand. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched his face drain of color. It was a wire transfer receipt, $7 million from Carmichael Biotech to an account in Georgetown, Cayman Islands, date December 9th, 2 weeks before Holden filed for divorce. Gideon looked at Holden, his voice low and venomous. "You told me the financials were clean." "They are," Holden hissed back, sweat forming along his hairline. "That account is encrypted. There's no way she could have accessed it. She doesn't even know how to use Excel." I sat back down and finally allowed myself the smallest smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who just set a trap and watched their prey step into it. "Call your first witness, Mr. Cross," Judge Whitmore said, her voice dropping an octave. "And it better be good." The energy in the courtroom had shifted. This wasn't a massacre anymore, it was war. Gideon Cross recovered quickly. He was a seasoned litigator and he knew how to pivot. He shoved the document into his briefcase and stood up, his composure restored. "I call Dr. Orrin Finch to the stand," Gideon announced. Dr. Orrin Finch was Holden's chief financial officer at Carmichael Biotech. He was a wiry man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a suit that probably cost more than my car. He took the oath, his hand steady on the Bible.
"Dr. Finch," Gideon began, pacing slowly, "you oversee all financial operations for Carmichael Biotech, correct?" "That's correct," Finch said. "Are you familiar with the plaintiff's allegations regarding hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands or the so-called Crescent Trust?" Finch adjusted his glasses and looked at me like I was a child who'd just suggested the earth was flat. "I've never heard of such things," Finch said smoothly. "Our books are audited annually by Ernst & Young. Everything is above board. Ms. Hale is likely confusing standard operating expenses with some sort of conspiracy theory she found on the internet." "Thank you," Gideon said, looking pleased. He turned to the judge. "You see, Your Honor, a simple misunderstanding of corporate finance." He looked at me. "Your witness." I stood up slowly. I left my notepad on the table. I walked right up to the witness stand and looked Orrin Finch directly in the eye. Finch shifted uncomfortably. He'd known me for 6 years. He'd been to our house for Thanksgiving dinner twice. He knew I made excellent pumpkin pie. He didn't know I could read a balance sheet better than most accountants. "Hello, Dr. Finch," I said. "Ms. Hale," he replied stiffly. "Do you remember the company retreat in Aspen in January of last year? New Year's weekend, actually." "Yes, I was there." "Do you remember asking me to hold your laptop while you went skiing? You said you were afraid someone would steal it from the lodge." Finch blinked. "I may have. I don't recall." "I recall it very clearly," I said. "You were drunk. You told me the password was your son's birthday, April 9th, 2014. "Objection!" shouted Gideon. "Relevance?" "I'm getting there, Your Honor," I said calmly. Judge Whitmore nodded. "Proceed, but get there quickly." I pulled a paper from my small stack and placed it on the overhead projector. "Dr. Finch, is it true that Carmichael Biotech uses accounting software called Dual Trace?" Finch's face went pale. That's a standard industry tool." "Is it?" I asked. "Because according to the software's own website, Dual Trace is a dual-entry bookkeeping system designed specifically to maintain 2 sets of financial records, one for the IRS and one for the owners." I take the 5th, Finch stammered. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. "You can't take the 5th Amendment in a civil divorce proceeding unless you're admitting to a crime, Dr. Finch," Judge Whitmore said sharply. "Answer the question." "It has that capability," Finch whispered.
I continued, relentless now. On December 23rd of last year, just 2 weeks before Holden filed for divorce, did you authorize a wire transfer of $8.4 million labeled as consulting fees to a company called Helix Group? Holden told me to, Finch blurted, looking at his boss in panic. He said it was for expansion into European markets. And who owns Helix Group, Dr. Finch? I don't know, Finch lied weakly. I turned to Judge Whitmore. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit B. I placed a new document on the overhead projector. It was the Articles of Incorporation for Helix Group, registered in Nevada. The name on the ownership line was crystal clear. Bianca Levine, the mistress. The courtroom erupted. People in the gallery were murmuring. Reporters were typing frantically on their phones. Holden buried his face in his hands.
Order! Judge Whitmore slammed her gavel 3 times. Order in this court! She glared at Holden with pure disgust. Mr. Cross, control your client and your witnesses, or I will start issuing sanctions that will bankrupt you both. Gideon looked at Holden with undisguised hatred. You told me the girl wasn't involved in the financials, he hissed. She's not, Holden whispered frantically. I just used her name. I didn't think Emery would find it. She's a waitress, Gideon. She barely graduated high school. I walked back to my table and took a sip of water. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the sheer satisfaction of watching everything Holden had built start to crumble. I looked at him across the aisle. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was staring at me like I was a stranger who'd just kicked down his door in the middle of the night. But I knew this was just the opening act. The hard part was coming, because Holden had one card left to play, a card that could destroy my credibility and leave me with nothing, no matter how much money I proved existed. And I could see from the way Gideon was shuffling his papers that he was about to play it. Gideon Cross stood up slowly. He adjusted his tie with deliberate precision, and when he looked at me, his eyes had gone cold. The smirk was gone. What replaced it was something far more dangerous, the calculating stare of a predator who'd been wounded and was about to strike back. Your Honor, Gideon said, his voice dropping into a register that made the temperature in the room feel 10 degrees colder. We'd like to address the issue of Miss Hale's mental fitness. We call Emery Hale to the stand. My stomach dropped. This was it, the nuclear option. I walked to the witness box on legs that felt like they might give out. The bailiff administered the oath, and I placed my hand on the Bible, feeling the worn leather under my palm. Miss Hale, Gideon began, circling me like a shark. You seem remarkably knowledgeable about corporate finance today, almost suspiciously so for someone who was just a waitress. I pay attention, I said quietly. Do you? Gideon pulled a document from his folder. Because according to a sworn affidavit from your former psychiatrist, Dr. Callum Ashford, you were diagnosed with severe paranoid delusions. Isn't it true that you were hospitalized in 2021 after a mental breakdown? The room went silent, the kind of silence where you could hear fabric rustling, someone shifting in their seat 3 rows back. I sought treatment for depression. I lost a pregnancy, a baby girl, at 23 weeks. Yes, a tragedy, Gideon said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. But during that hospitalization, you accused your husband of poisoning your food, tampering with your medication. You were placed on heavy antipsychotics. Isn't that correct? Yes. And isn't it true that you have a documented history of fabricating elaborate stories, that you are, in medical terminology, an unreliable narrator? I looked at Holden. He was grinning. This was his ace. Crazy Emery, poor delusional Emery who couldn't be trusted. I was medicated, I said, and my voice started gaining strength. I was medicated because my husband was gaslighting me, and I can prove that too. Gideon let out a short, derisive laugh. How? With more stolen documents? No, I said calmly. With recordings. Gideon's smile evaporated instantly. What recordings? He demanded. New York is a one-party consent state for audio recording, I said. For the last 18 months of our marriage, I carried a digital recorder in my purse. Every threat, every confession, every time Holden told me he'd have me committed permanently if I ever tried to leave. I have all of it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small black USB drive. I held it up so the entire courtroom could see it. Exhibit C, Your Honor. Holden jumped to his feet so violently his chair toppled backward with a crash. "He can't use that," he screamed. "Those are private conversations. Gideon, stop her." "Sit down, Mr. Carmichael," Judge Whitmore roared. "One more outburst and I'll have the bailiff restrain you." Holden slowly sank back into his chair, his chest heaving. Judge Whitmore turned to me. "Mrs. Carmichael, you're telling me you have audio evidence of the respondent admitting to what, exactly?" I looked directly at Holden. "Admitting to fraud, Your Honor. Admitting to bribing Dr. Ashford to falsify my psychiatric diagnosis, and admitting that he caused my miscarriage." The silence that followed felt like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. "Play it," Judge Whitmore ordered. The bailiff took the USB drive and plugged it into the court's audio system. The speakers crackled with static. Then Holden's voice filled the room. "Stop crying, Emery. It's pathetic." Holden's recorded voice was cold, dripping with contempt. "You really think anyone's going to believe you?" "I know what you're doing with the offshore accounts," Ima reached. "I saw the files, Holden, the Crescent Trust." "You saw papers you don't understand. But let's pretend you do. Who are they going to believe? The CEO who just brought 3 life-saving drugs to market, or the hysterical wife who spent 2 months in a psych ward?" "You put me there," I whispered on the tape. "You paid Dr. Ashford." "I didn't pay him to say anything," Holden boasted. "I bought him. $70,000 is a lot of money for a psychiatrist with a gambling problem. He'll write whatever diagnosis I want. Paranoia, schizophrenia. Take your pick." There was a pause on the recording. "And if you think I'm going to let you take what's mine, you're even crazier than I made you look. I'll have you committed permanently. I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life drooling in a padded room while I enjoy every penny with Bianca." The recording clicked off. The silence was deafening. Judge Whitmore slowly removed her reading glasses and cleaned them, her movements terrifyingly calm. She looked down at the defense table with an expression that could have frozen hell. "Mr. Cross," the judge said, her voice barely above a whisper, "did your client just admit to bribing a medical professional to falsify a diagnosis?" Gideon stood up, looking pale. "Your Honor, I've never heard this recording. It could be manipulated." "It's not fake," I interrupted, "because I brought a witness." "Who?" Holden snapped. "I isolated you from everyone." I looked toward the back of the courtroom. The heavy oak doors swung open. A man walked in. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled and stained. His eyes were red-shot, ringed with dark circles. It was Dr. Callum Ashford. Holden gasped. "I call Dr. Callum Ashford to the stand," I announced. Dr. Ashford took the stand, his hands shaking as he placed one on the Bible. "Dr. Ashford," I said gently, "you treated me in 2021, correct?" "Yes," Ashford mumbled. "And you signed an affidavit this morning stating that I suffer from severe paranoid delusions? Is that true?" Dr. Ashford looked at Judge Whitmore. He swallowed hard. "No," he whispered. "Speak up, doctor," Judge Whitmore commanded. "No!" Ashford shouted, tears streaming down his face. "It's not true. She's sane. She was always sane. I lied. I made it all up." The courtroom erupted. "Why did you lie?" I asked. Ashford pointed at Holden.
Because he paid me. I had debts, bad debts. Holden paid off $70,000 to a loan shark in Atlantic City. In exchange, I diagnosed Emery with conditions she didn't have. I prescribed medications to make her confused. I gaslit her in therapy. I made her think she was losing her mind. He turned to me, tears running freely. I'm sorry, Emery. I destroyed your life because I was a coward. Did Holden ever discuss my pregnancy with you? I asked quietly. The doctor's face crumpled. Yes, he said you getting pregnant ruined his timeline. He asked me if there were medications that could cause complications. And did you prescribe those medications? Yes, Ashford sobbed. I prescribed a beta blocker contraindicated in pregnancy. I told you it was for anxiety. When you lost the baby at 23 weeks, Holden called me and said, "Problem solved." The courtroom went still. Someone gasped. "No further questions," I whispered. Judge Whitmore's face had gone rigid. "Dr. Ashford, you're not leaving this building. The bailiff will escort you to a holding room." As Dr. Ashford was led away sobbing, Judge Whitmore turned to Holden. "Ms. Hale," Dudley said, "do you have further evidence regarding the hidden assets?" "I do, Your Honor, but I need the court to examine the pension fund for Carmichael Biotech employees." Holden's head snapped up. "The pension fund?" whispered Gideon. "What did you do? Tell me right now." "It's complicated," stammered Holden. "I borrowed against it temporarily." Gideon closed his eyes. "You embezzled from your employee's retirement, Holden. That's federal." I placed a new document on the projector. Exhibit D. This is a comparison of employee contributions to the Carmichael Biotech 401k versus actual deposits at JP Morgan Chase. I pointed to a column. Every employee had 6% deducted for retirement. That money was supposed to go to Chase. It didn't. I placed another document. This is the ledger from Meridian Holdings in the Cayman Islands. The dates match perfectly. He was skiving the pension fund, laundering it offshore, and using it to buy real estate in his mistress's name. The courtroom buzzed angrily. "Mr. Cross," Judge Whitmore said, "does your client have an explanation?" Gideon stood slowly. "Your Honor, we request a recess." "Denied," Judge Whitmore said. "If your client invokes his Fifth Amendment rights, I'll draw an adverse inference. If he stays silent to avoid prison, he loses the divorce. If he speaks to win the divorce, he confesses to federal crimes. Choose." Holden stood up and shoved Gideon aside. "This is insane. I'm the CEO. It's my company. It was a bridge loan." "Unauthorized by the board?" I asked. "Because I have the meeting minutes. You never told them. You fired the internal auditor who questioned it last October."
"She was incompetent," Holden yelled, "just like you. You think you can destroy me? I built this empire. Without me, you're nothing. You're just a waitress from Queens." "Mr. Carmichael, control yourself." Judge Whitmore slammed her gavel. "She hacked my computer. That's illegal." "I didn't hack your computer, Holden," I said softly. The room quieted. "You linked your phone to the family iCloud account so you could upload photos with Bianca. You didn't realize every document you saved was syncing to the cloud storage I paid for, the account still in my name." A few people laughed nervously. Gideon started packing his briefcase. "Where are you going, Mr. Krause?" Judge Whitmore asked. "I'm withdrawing as counsel. My client has lied to me repeatedly and just confessed to embezzlement on record." "You're not leaving." Holden grabbed his arm. "I pay you $400 an hour." "Get your hands off me," Gideon snarled. "Ms. Hale," Judge Whitmore said, "what is your request for judgment?" I took a deep breath. "I don't want half, Your Honor." Holden froze. "What?" "I don't want half. I want all of it." "On what grounds?" "Dissipation of assets. When one spouse maliciously wastes marital assets to defraud the other, the court can award 100% to the injured party. Holden emptied the pension fund. He hid millions offshore. If you give him even half, he'll flee the country. I pulled out one final document. He has a flight booked to Sao Paulo, Brazil tonight at 11:45 p.m. One-way ticket, Exhibit E. Holden patted his pockets frantically. "My iCloud," he whispered, horrified. "He's a flight risk. I'm asking for full control of the assets and voting control of Carmichael Biotech shares to be held in trust so I can repay the employees he stole from." Judge Whitmore looked at Holden, then at the evidence. "Mr. Carmichael, surrender your passport, immediately." "I don't have it. It's at home." "Bailiff, search him." The bailiff stepped forward. Holden backed away. "Don't touch me." Suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open with a bang. 6 people in Navy windbreakers marched in, followed by NYPD officers. The windbreakers read FBI and SEC. The lead agent, a tall woman, walked straight to Holden. "Holden Carmichael, I'm Special Agent Simone Winters with the FBI. We have warrants for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." Holden collapsed into his chair. He looked at me with disbelief. I didn't look away. Federal agents pulled his arms behind his back and cuffed him. As they led him out, Holden twisted back. "You destroyed me." "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." 3 weeks later, on January 21st, I stood in Holden's corner office on the 47th floor. It was my office now. I'd been named interim CEO by emergency board vote. The stock crashed initially, dropping 42%, but when employees learned I was restoring their pension fund in full, it rallied. Within a week, we were back to 80%. I'd fired 3 corrupt board members and brought in a forensic accounting team, and I'd personally called all 4,000 employees to apologize. But tonight, I had one final piece of business. I walked to the bookshelf and removed a leather-bound book Holden always bragged about. Behind it was a wall safe. I punched in the code. Inside was a single envelope. I opened it. It was a handwritten letter from Holden to Bianca, dated 2 years ago. In it, he detailed exactly how he planned to divorce me, frame me as mentally unstable, and leave me with nothing. "Just one more year of pretending," he'd written. "Then we're free, baby, and that stupid waitress will be exactly where she belongs, broke and alone." I folded the letter and placed it in my briefcase. It would go to the prosecutor in the morning. As I walked out that night, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, broken, medicated, convinced I was losing my mind. And I thought about the woman I was now. I wasn't that scared waitress anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was Emery Hale, and I'd just dismantled a criminal empire with nothing but patience, evidence, and a willingness to fight when everyone said I should give up. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold on New Year's Eve, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Holden's sentence was enough, or should he have gotten more? See you in the next one.